Hey guys, so this is going to be a lecture video for World War II, notes number 3, World War II begins. So let's get started with opening the notes. Here we go, notes number 3. So everything starts with, of course, Adolf Hitler and his rise to power in Germany. We talked about that in notes number 2. And the problems with other countries, and especially with the rest of the world, starts with his push to get more territory. He starts off with Austria. He wanted Austria to be part of the German Empire that he was now the Führer of. Most of Austria's population favored unification with Germany. They wanted to be part of Germany's empire. Plus, Adolf Hitler was Austrian, so one of them was the head of this empire. Now, the thing about getting this territory is every time you get land, you get power. Two different types of power. You get economic power because land equals natural resources, which equals wealth, and that wealth turns into power. But you also get military power because there's more people in that new territory, and those people can be soldiers. So it means the military gets bigger, and so does the economy. So the idea of appeasement is going to come in here, where they're going to give Hitler what he wants to avoid going to war. So they're going to give him Austria and made him more powerful. But he had to promise that basically he would just take Austria and be happy. And of course he did promise, but he did not keep that promise. He then started pushing for that area called the Sudetenland. So if we look at this map real quick, which we're going to go to several times. Here's Germany, here's Austria, and this is Czechoslovakia. The western part, this part right here, is called the Sudetenland. This part used to be German. Therefore, Germans still live there. And World War I ended with the Treaty of Versailles, and one of the punishments for Germany was they lost this piece of land, again called the Sudetenland, and he wants it back. Now, he claims it's because the Czechoslovakian government is hurting the Germans there. But the real reason, as you see in the notes, is because it was full of natural resources. So because it was full of natural resources, it was going to beat a lot of wealth and a lot more power for him economically, so that's what he wants. And again, it will be an annex, which means that they come willingly with permission because those Germans want to be part of Germany again. But this time, they said a simple promise is not enough. They wanted it to be an agreement, a contract. So they signed the Munich Agreement, a contract between France, Britain, and Germany, saying basically, you get the Sudetenland, and that's it. And of course, he promises. Now, what happens now is Germany continues to invade one territory after another, essentially getting so strong that France and England are no longer a threat to him. But what is a threat to him is the Soviet Union. So this is basically how the empire broke down. So all this is the German Empire, and all this is the Soviet Empire. And usually with two empires this big and powerful right next to each other, with two very aggressive leaders like Stalin and Hitler were, we know what's happening. They're going to go to war to see who's the best. Instead, they shocked everybody by signing something called the Non-Aggression Pact, where basically we are not going to be friends, we're not going to be enemies either. And that led to the invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939, where essentially World War II begins because France and England had warned Germany, do not invade Poland or else, and Germany invaded with something called Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg is another way of saying lightning war, where essentially you hit them all at once from every direction so fast that by the time they try to figure out how to defend themselves, they've already been conquered. And France and England were declared war on them. So now for Germany, they took the land they weren't supposed to, and then it's quiet. And France and England were, for a couple months, it's quiet. And if France and England got into the impression this might be it, and then boom, he hits really hard, takes over Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. 5 countries, boom, 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 just like that, which now leaves France and Great Britain. France, as you see in section 2, will go down because of a mistake they made. Now, in going over the notes, we discussed that here is all mountainous territory. Here, between here and here, is something called the Maginot Line. It's a line of fortification built by France to stop an invasion. So therefore, the Germans would only be able to invade through Belgium. So the French are all waiting for them. The Germans are here. But right here is a forest that nobody had ever passed with an army. And therefore, the French didn't protect it. Germany went right through that forest and went around the French and surrounded them. And this is the reason why France fell in 6 weeks. So in 6 weeks, the Empire of France will go down. So the Maginot Line failed to protect them, and Germany will control France, and they will set up something called the Vichy government. The Vichy government is a German-controlled government that ruled France while all this stuff was going on. So what it means is who's left to protect Europe? The United States is not going to protect Europe because we're neutral. We're still clinging to isolationism. So it's up to Britain. And Germany decides that they are going to bomb Britain in the Battle of Britain for 6 straight months. 6 straight months of bomb, 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 bomb. And the idea of Germany was, we're going to bomb you into submission. And this is going to lead to tons of fights in the air between the Luftwaffe, which is the German Air Force, and the Royal Air Force, the British Air Force. And the Royal Air Force is going to win a lot, but it's also going to lose a lot, which meant a lot of destruction of cities that were bombed by the Luftwaffe and by the bombers. So 6 months, England was basically on their knees, not surrendered yet, but they were there. And then Hitler called off the invasion. Why? Because at this point, he decided that he needed to attack somebody else, and that somebody else is going to be the Soviet Union. But why would he attack the Soviet Union? We said he'd signed a Non-Aggression Pact. Yeah, they determined that they weren't going to be enemies and friends either, but neither of them trusted each other. They both realized what kind of leader they were making a pact with, and both honestly thought that they would eventually betray each other. So Hitler's attitude is, before he betrays me, I'm going to betray him. So he broke the Non-Aggression Pact, and he invades the Soviet Union with Operation Barbarossa. Barbarossa led 4.5 million troops into the Soviet Union. And if we go back to that map, you could see that he went pretty damn deep into the Soviet Union. This is the capital of the Soviet Union. Leningrad is a major city, and it's conquered by Germany. Another major city, Stalingrad, is right at the edge. And essentially the capital and Stalingrad are about to fall. And the Soviet Union realizes we have to survive until this gets here. Germany realized we have to win before this gets here. And what that thing was a brutal, brutal winter that was coming. And Germany will not win before the winter hits. And then the winter will hit their military in the Soviet Union. And the winter will destroy the powerful German army. And essentially will make them retreat out of the Soviet Union. Their first big loss was not on the hands of the Soviets. It was the hands of weather. So at this point, the Soviets, since the Germans are retreating, start chasing after them. And we, the US, start helping Stalin. Yeah, that doesn't sound right. We should not be helping a crazy lunatic. But this is what we talked about. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Well, Stalin's enemy is Hitler, and he's our enemy too. So therefore, we kind of are friends. So we started providing them lots of weapons and supplies to make sure that they could keep hitting Germany hard and pushing them back as they were retreating all the way back to Germany. So as all this stuff is happening in Europe, what exactly are we doing here? Now, to the world, we have been very clear. We are neutral. We are isolated. We are not getting involved in this war. But that was the message of the American people. They still remembered World War I, and they did not want to do that ever again. But the American government's attitude was different. They see what Hitler's doing in Europe. They see the power that he has. And their attitude is, we can't just pretend that that doesn't exist. We have to start planning just in case we do have to deal with him. So the message from America was no war, no war, no war. That's for the American people. But from the American government was they started doing these 5 things. Now, the first one is defense spending. The budget for defense spending grew a huge amount. Now, what is defense spending for? The war effort. So somebody might argue, why are you spending so much more money on the department in charge of war if you truly are neutral? And this is one of those cases where you can easily answer, well, just in case we need it. So they started to build a lot more ships and tanks and airplanes, all those things that you would need if you're going to war, even though we claimed we were neutral and not going to go to war. But again, by itself, simply saying just in case might work. But then we did cash and carry. Now, earlier in the 30s, we had said we are not getting involved and we are serious. We passed the Neutrality Act, which said we are not going to sell weapons or loan any money to any country at war. So we made it clear we're not going to war. And then cash and carry said, well, we're not going to war, but we will sell them weapons. But only if they bring their cash and they come and pick up their weapons and carry them home. And that's the way Great Britain is going to get this. They have to come in, give us money, and then take their weapons with them. So, but that's it, no more. But then we modified that one again too with the Lend-Lease Act. No more cash and no more carry. Essentially, we will let you take the weapons on loan, like credit, and we will take the weapons to you. Now that's a big one, because if we're taking weapons to to England and Germany sees us, what are they going to do? They're going to shoot us down because we're helping their enemy, even though we still claim we're neutral, even though we still claim we're not in the war. So this one really escalated the situation. But again, we are still neutral. Then we did the selective service system, which is setting up a draft. Why would you set up a drafting of soldiers to go to a war that you say you're not going to go? In fact, this is the first time ever we had ever had a draft when it's peacetime. Why? Because again, even though we kept saying no war, no war, no war, we were acting like a country who was about to go to war. And then you get the last one, the Atlantic Charter, a meeting between FDR and Churchill, the leader of England, where essentially they met to decide if the U.S. does go to war eventually, what would the plan look like? So if you're another country and you keep hearing from the United States, no war, no war, no war, but then they're spending a huge amount of money on their Defense Department, they're starting selling weapons to your enemy, but only if they bring their cash and take them themselves. Then they're like, don't worry about bringing cash and don't worry about picking them up. Well, then at least I will take it to you and you can put it on credit. Then they have a draft of soldiers, first one ever in peacetime, and then they're meeting with your enemy. You don't see a neutral country. You don't see a country who's not going to war. So this is one of the reasons, or 5 reasons, I guess, why Japan is going to attack us on December 7, 1941 with the attack of Pearl Harbor. Because what they saw was these 5 things that the U.S. was doing, and they did not see a neutral country. They saw a country who was their enemy. So they treated us like their enemy, and they attacked. All right, we'll continue that in notes number 5. Have a good day.